at Collinwood. Here with Alan Gallant, and we're not quite certain where Jewel is. I can only imagine what Gordon would be saying right now,
Oh
but
yeah.
but he's not here, so we'll have to make do. Um, so anyway, uh, in the meantime, in case Jewel wants to use it, we're freeloaders at Collinwood talking about the film
Yes.
Talk to Me, an A24 film from Australia. And Alan, what did we talk about just a few moments ago?
Well, what we talked about a few moments ago was for one thing the acting quality, of particularly the lead, the young woman that plays Nia, and how well she did. The fact that it's a supernatural horror thriller, but it's got a lot of great psychological elements to it. Including the sort of confusion and a misapprehension and misidentification of things that comes from like nervous breakdowns, delusions, that sort of thing.
PTSD.
Yeah,
The girl's mother, so she thinks, has committed suicide.
right.
Um, and I guess we should catch people up on the plot. So in the film, some Australian teens have happened across a mummified hand.
Yes,
At times it looks more like a sculpture and acts like a
it does. It
sculpture.
looks like a hand off a statue.
Yeah,
They describe
and
the inside of this calcified exterior. So
yeah, and they have a ritual whereby they will become briefly possessed. They'll be able to talk to a ghost and then become possessed by that ghost, but it's only for a very short period of time. And one of their curious younger siblings uh, gets the wrong one, gets perhaps the parent of one of the kids, Mia, who has committed suicide recently. The
right,
parent, not Mia. She wouldn't be in the movie.
right. No,
And he then begins a campaign of a tremendous self-harm while possessed,
yes,
and so has to be hospitalized. She is racked with guilt. She begins seeing these apparitions even without the ritual
right.
involving the hand, and
This is
there's a
after
lot.
they exhibit addictive behavior with the ritual for a period
Oh
of time.
sure, yeah,
Then she
it's a total
starts to
drug metaphor.
hallucinate or whatever, see the apparitions on
And
it.
so at last she finds out that there perhaps are rules to possession and rules to dispossession, I guess. And she has to decide what she's going to do about this young man and about this spirit claiming to be her mother. So I
Yeah,
think that's a pretty good
that is
summary
pretty
of
tough.
the
Yeah,
film.
yeah.
So now that we've been there, one of the things that you mentioned is that you're not a big fan of body horror and so on and so forth. It
Yes.
is a gory movie in some places. It's a visceral movie.
Yes.
And my thought was is that the gore in the film, and I'm going to stop moving around here in a second. The gore in the film is all very forensic. It's if there is going to be gore, this is very necessary gore because the dead are in the condition they were when they passed.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
and they passed pretty badly. So, having said that, uh, it is, in Jules' words, a very psychological film.
Hmm.
Um, and it deals with our our relationship with trauma uh, pretty pointedly,
Yes, it
which
does.
is what you were addressing.
Yeah, both already established trauma and then the new trauma of the situation, and making that peak up. I mean, obviously, Nia's got a lot of trauma surrounding her mother, a lot of guilt and trauma surrounding, as you mentioned earlier, because it kind of centers around this idea: did she commit suicide? Well, the apparition is telling her, no, no, I would never do that to you, but everybody else is telling her, yes, she did, including her father, stepfather, I forget which it is, who has this letter, and this is one of the breaking points for her. This letter, it sort of it triggers her pretty hard.
So
To that.
I, I think we can't. Well, I am reluctant to talk about the film without just saying, okay, there's spoilers here.
Hmm.
So if you're worried about the end of the movie being a mystery, then go watch something else.
Yes.
But okay, so here we are. So at the end of the film, the thing that maybe her mother,
Right.
probably not.
Or a version of
Um,
her mother that is not that she would be necessarily totally familiar with outside of her convincing her of certain things.
does the mother win at the end of the film?
Well, the mother wants her to kill the boy to release him from his pain because she's had this vision of the boy in hell being surrounded by these other dead people with red lights appropriately everywhere
Of
and him
course.
tortured by them. So
Yeah.
we don't know if that also could be some demonic mendacity going on. We don't know.
It's very
So
big daddy of you. Mendacity.
mendacity.
Um, there's some weird stuff that the mother says nothing but weird stuff, but
Right.
there's some especially weird stuff at the end of the movie where I think she says, "We'll be here for him. We'll support him. We'll help his way. We'll do all of that stuff."
Yeah. I'm
Is
not
she
buying that.
really? Well, here's the thing. So this is where I think this is the mother's scheme all along,
Right.
is to get this miserable daughter, or whatever the mother apparition is, get this miserable daughter to kill herself,
Right.
so she will be on the other side with them.
In that,
And
if you're going to say that and interpret that way, then she definitely wins. She gets what she's actually looking for, or it's actually looking for.
it's one of the only things that really I feel like makes the ending make sense for me, because she's gone, she's going to kill the kid and all of that, and then suddenly she's down there.
Right.
And I like, and we don't quite see what happens. And I like that because, the one of the heroines of the movie is, the girl, the guy's sister's running up behind
Right.
her
Right.
and
Sure.
so on to stop it. And I assume it's just a comedy of errors, and she winds
Right.
up
She ends
in
up
the road.
down the hill. Right.
Um, and so she's not certain. It's clear that she's not certain what happened in her death.
No, and we're not certain that she's dead yet either. When we're
No, we're
first
not.
confronted by that top shot down onto the street, and she's laying in the street, and she gets up, she pops right up, and she's beat up, and the whole 9 yards. And it's like, well, we're not quite sure what's happening yet. Now,
Yeah.
walking away from being, hammered by a vehicle isn't a highly likely thing, but it gives you pause for a
It,
second.
it's not. Scientists would tell us that, if you're going to survive a vehicular bodily collision, your body will take on the shape of the front of the car briefly,
Right.
like Plastic Man,
Hmm.
and then pop out. Like if you're hitting the head of the frying pan, it takes on that shape. But this doesn't happen to her, and that's my clue that we've left the realm of science and
Yeah.
realism.
Yeah, her head doesn't look like a frying pan. Right. It's
So
true though. She doesn't have. She has injuries, but she doesn't. Her arms aren't broken or akimbo or anything like that.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
So because we're sort of safe to geek out on these things without
Yes.
boring other people, except for those unfortunate enough to be watching. Uh, there's a question that comes up in classes. Came up when I was in high school about Hamlet, and it struck me with this movie also, and it's this. One of the pressures in this film with the group of teens is that Fortinbras is mounting his attack.
Hmm.
I'm just kidding. But one of the questions that comes up is you have a ghost of a parent who is trying to communicate something to a child
To their child. Yeah.
and get them in, get them into some action, and and there is a question. It doesn't come up quite as much in Hamlet as it does in this, I think, but that is this really her mother?
Right.
And I think that's what we're centering on. And so do you feel like there's definite evidence one way or the other that it's not? And if it could be her mother, could it simply be that the process of being dead has driven her insane?
Yes, that's an entirely possible outcome of, because I these people seem to be in hell. These people that are coming to her,
Yes.
and to
Yes.
they seem to be in anguish, and they put the living people through anguish when they inhabit them. So this would tell me
Sure.
they're probably in some kind of hell, maybe
I
of
mean,
their
were
own
they?
creation.
But
Maybe they're what's left of their spiritual psychology, or whatever you want to call it, is put themselves in some kind of hell.
now Edith Piaf is in a pretty good mood because at one point it looks like someone's channeling Edith Piaf,
Yeah.
which I wasn't expecting that. Um, and then there's the wacky dog scene.
Oh, I kept going. I hate when there are animals in horror films, because I always expect them to get killed or something, and I hate that shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm particularly fond of dogs and cats, so I got one
So
sleep.
Cujo and Pet Cemetery are not big on your list.
No, not really. And I actually feel sorry for Cujo, because he is
He's
completely
sick.
destroyed and sick, and yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Um. Uh.
So I would
Okay.
say
So
that my first impression is that the mother is really the mother. That's the first impression you get in the movie. She comes
yeah.
to her, and all this stuff is happening, and what we've seen from it, we're being inured into the reality of these rituals, that it's real, and that this is happening to these kids, and you sort of get the idea that that's real. There's another possibility too, and that is that as the addiction to these rituals push themselves into a period where, as in drug addiction, where you can't stop, you keep going, or you're pressured by other users to do it again and do it again. There's that sort of thing going on, and at that same time, as that's happening, uh, is that are the visitations getting more confusing from the visitor's point of view, or are they getting more confusing from the user's point of view?
So even if this is a supernatural phenomenon, is it possible that it's entirely self-generated and that people are simply manifesting things they have issues with or have dreamed about? In some cases, as with dreams, it's completely harmless.
Right,
It's just the
right,
brain kind of scrambling things together. But in other ones, I think about the we go back to the dog scene, where sexually repressed, maybe certainly sexually reluctant young man uh, flies into a state of ecstasy that
right.
would put Portnoy to shame,
Absolutely.
and he winds up on the floor making
Yeah.
out with a dog.
Dog.
Now the dog seemed perfectly happy. I
Yes,
mean,
for
I
sure.
imagine they had to put a lot of gravy in the guy's mouth or
Probably.
something like that.
Yes.
But but
Not
I
exactly
mean,
a scene you prepare for. You just like, let's just do this shit and get it over with.
this is a case where I don't think the dog certainly was not getting some sort of erotic charge
No.
out of it. God, I hope. But I think the
Peanut
dog
butter.
is probably having a good day. They had to
Yeah,
put something that really tasted good on that
yeah.
guy. And
It's
that
like
that actor,
the guy, he
God
actually
bless him.
becomes a human Kong. You stick the peanut butter in, and the dog plays with it until the peanut butter.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. But what I was gonna say is that maybe these things are simply, in some cases or in all cases, some super manifestation of what they have going on inside,
it's
which
possible.
then brings up all of her issues about her mom.
Right.
She doesn't want the mom to have committed suicide. And, maybe she's angry at the father for surviving, or would like to blame him for some sort of situation
Right.
that spurred her to commit suicide. And so this all very conveniently fits into her narrative.
It does, and the mother also talks about, ties into Nia's guilt about the boy being basically hospitalized and semi-vegetative, and the mother says, we'll take care of him. We'll take care of him." It's like an assuaging of that guilt.
And when I hear her saying that again, I come back to basically this thought of, here's someone who's not taken care of. She's very lonely.
Mhm.
Mia's very lonely in the movie,
Yes.
and I think what she's hearing is, "We'll take care of you."
Right. That's
At least
that,
someone is taking care of someone else.
right. Or solving your problems for you, or doing, you don't have to feel this way anymore, that sort of thing. And of course that, of all those feelings intensify with the use of the drug, which
Sure,
is the ritual. So it keeps
sure.
intensifying. And
And like psychedelics is just bringing out
it's
what's
bringing out what's
within.
already there. Right.
Yeah, I think in is it the book of Thomas, there's some quote about, what I bring out of me will save me, and what I don't bring out of me will destroy me.
Right.
In this case, it's exactly the opposite.
Yes.
That some things are best left repressed,
Hmm.
and in
Or
that sense,
dealt
it's a
with in
great.
a different way than what she's dealing with, or maybe she's not
Yes,
dealing with, she's just letting it out, and it's not really being dealt with.
this is a great anti-drug movie. I mean,
It
it
kind
really
of, I
is.
mean, there are parallels. There are definitely
Yeah,
things that you can look into that. I noticed that immediately, having, because I'm a recovering addict and alcoholic, so all of those things hit me when I was in my 20s. By the time I was in my early 30s, I kind of quit everything all at once and gone completely berserk, because I also quit smoking at the same time. It was like,
take care of it all.
but yeah, I recognize behaviors,
It,
and the group behaviors that you get into if you're in that thing, because you surround yourself with other people that are that way, and they sort of cluster around you and make you do it again, and or socially pressure you to do it again. So um,
I have some acquaintances who suffer from SUDs,
mhm.
and they particularly find this film to be the most terrifying movie they've ever seen. They said, "This is satanic. We'd never let our kids see this," et
Right,
cetera, et cetera. And
right.
now that we're talking about that, I'm really wondering. I'm not really certain they've made the connection, but if what's
Maybe on a
really
subconscious,
disturbing them,
yeah, maybe on a subconscious level they made that connection, that gut level connection that makes you, no, 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 not going there. You know.
yeah,
Thing. So yeah.
yeah. So are you? I imagine you are. I don't want to make any assumption. You're fairly familiar with the A24 brand at this point.
Not not terribly. No, I'm
So
not.
Midsummer,
This is actually the first movie I've seen the imprint on film.
really,
Yes.
really. Well, I would.
I don't watch a lot of horror terror. I don't. I mean, in spite of being drawn to things like Dark Shadows, I don't watch a lot of that, because until I get word that it's not going to be a splatter fest, then
Sure,
more inclined.
sure. There are several A24 movies that I can recommend. It's a studio with a lot of integrity, um, uh, in the horror field, because they just came out with a Civil War movie. This thing about the modern day Civil War that's
Right.
in all
Right.
the papers.
Yes.
Uh, but the two films I would recommend, and maybe if we continue to sort of do these pirate broadcasts, the two films I would recommend would be Hereditary, which is just fantastic,
Okay.
and Tony Collette, who's just dynamite, and Gabriel Byrne,
Right.
I think,
Yeah.
who's really, really, really just warm and loving, and
Mhm.
it's a fabulous film, and there are visceral moments in these movies,
Sure.
but they genuinely come out of the plot. And it's the sort of thing like in this, except this is easily the goriest A24 movie I've seen,
Okay.
um, where the idea of what just happened, and sometimes the sound effect of what just happened, lingers in the best way, in a psychological way, long after the
Yeah.
shot, because the shots are pretty quick.
Yeah. But the echoes of it continue.
uh, when I saw Hereditary, there was a moment, and of course it's one of these evenings where I'm preparing for a colonoscopy. I'm wearing a Scottish kilt so I can do
Just
what I
gotta
need to
do it.
do during the arduous prep. And a long-suffering friend of mine, Rebecca, who's one of my best friends, was over to give me spiritual support. And during this ordeal, brave soul that she was, we watched
Drinking
Elvis
that
and
stuff,
Nixon.
just I hate drinking that stuff. I mean,
Oh, it's the worst.
it's
It's
so
the
much,
worst.
much more traumatic than actually having the colonoscopy.
Well, yeah, you're out for that.
Yeah.
But then anyway, she brave soul that she was. She was over and lending moral support. And I was in the kitchen cooking something, I think, for her. I was pretty much done with food. And I heard this scream from the other room. And I went into the other room, and she was sitting on the back of the couch, just literally on the back of the couch, just pointing at the screen. Now, she's not a histrionic person. She's very
Right.
level-headed. And so I thought, what on earth happened? She said, rewind it. And so I rewound it a little bit, and the moment happened. And not in the name of shtick nor Lotzi did this occur. I screamed and hopped up on the back of the couch. Uh, and you really don't see anything, but it's the idea of it.
It's a
And
psychological jump scare.
it is, but then it goes into a dramatic moment, way beyond Albie, of just, oh my God, what are they going to have to talk to these people about? What's
Oh,
the conversation that's going to go on? And we don't see it.
right.
Oh, and that's one of the great mercies of the film. It's a dynamite,
Yeah.
dynamite movie.
Cool.
The other one is a Florence Pugh movie called Midsummer. Midsommr.
Omer.
Yeah.
Both of these movies. I've just not seen them yet. So
Wow.
yeah.
They're both terrific. They are, in the best sense, slow.
Uh-huh.
What are the euphemisms that we use? Deliberate in their pace.
Right. Well, I
They're
found this
deliberate.
movie deliberate in its pace too. I mean, it
It
was the
is.
longest hour and a half in terms of that. It wasn't
Mhm.
long in terms of oh my God. It was long in terms of how it unfolded, and it sort of unfolded in an almost kitchen drama way in a lot of ways. And so you get to take in all those moments that you were talking about.
Yeah, and yet I wouldn't want anything cut. And
No.
in fact, the only time I've seen Midsummer, it got re-released in a longer cut, like a 3-hour cut, and that's the one that I saw in the theaters. So I can't even think of it abbreviated.
Right.
Um, they they certainly have. Uh, I don't quite know what their formula is, except saying we're not going to produce crap. I
Ah,
mean, it's like Blumhouse, but with higher standards. And Blumhouse is a pretty good American producing organization of this stuff, but A24 really brings it home. This is their goriest movie,
okay.
and yet it never feels like they're sitting around saying, having a Herschel Gordon Lewis style conversation about, well, now we're going to have the guts flying everywhere because that's fun. It's just, this is the event that's going to happen next in the movie. And to be honest, we got to show it.
Right.
So, do you, so if we remove sort of gore and goopiness and things like that, are there experiences of being intentionally scared by a movie or something like that that you do enjoy?
Um, yeah, I mean, you have to understand that my mother, when she was pregnant with me, watched Psycho. And when I first saw Psycho, the jump scares in that, there's no real gore in that movie. It's all intentional violence, but it's all suggested in terms of its ultimate, stuff. Even the shower scene that you see the Hershey's syrup
Hershey
on,
syrup.
but you don't
Yeah.
actually see the dagger pierce flesh or any of that sort of thing to speak of. In the later Psycho films, you see the dagger piercing flesh, particularly
Yeah.
when he holds up his hand and she stabs him in the hand and does stuff
Yes.
like that. So there's not some. I found that ironic, and I think it was deliberately so. But
Was that in Psycho 3?
yeah, I think so. I think so.
There was an actress in that I love, Diana Scarwood. She plays the nun on the run who hides out at Norman's.
Okay.
And I don't think I've seen her in anything else except she plays the adult Christina Crawford. in Mommy
Mommy
Dearest.
Dearest. I'll
So
have to
what's
check
up with
that.
these
I'll
Oedipal
check.
movies that she's making? Anyway, so we're talking about gore. We're talking about Psycho. So
Yeah, like so Psycho was that kind of movie. It had sufficient jump scares in it. It had the build that got you kind of going because you didn't know what was happening next, particularly the first time you see it. After that, it's more anticipatory, but in the moment the first time. I mean, some anticipatory stuff, but much more in the moment. But that definitely. In psychological stuff, psychological horror, where somebody starts to a slow descent, and they maybe it's a murderous descent eventually. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's just whatever it is. But the slow descent, I find certain things about 2001: A Space Odyssey horrifying. So there's a certain helplessness that happens at certain points for some.
now, do you think that are you talking about Dave and Frank getting unhinged, or are you talking about Hal?
Hal, more
Yeah.
Hal. The dispassionate intention of Hal, which is to, I mean, Hal doesn't have Hal's amoral. Hal is programmed, and his program is kind of over this way. I can't let you do that. It's that kind of thing, and it's something about that dispassionate inevitability of that. I don't want to call it an intellect, but it kind of is.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Is Hal alive?
Yeah. Well, I mean, he seems to have an AI quality of some sort about him. He certainly seems to be responding off the cuff to certain things that are being attempted to go around.
He uses the word during Dave's assassination of him. He uses the word "feel."
Yes,
I can
that's
feel
right.
it.
I'd forgotten that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I often wonder if Hal considers himself alive, and maybe that alone is giving him a hard time, because he does seem to have affection for the guys, and yet he has this mission that he has to carry out, and that Alien would later echo in a weird way.
Yeah.
And I wonder if he thinks of the Discovery as his body, and that once he's expelled these guys, he does not want to let them back in. He's kind of pure.
Right. Yes.
Pure for the first time.
If he's
almost like getting an antibody,
Yeah, and if he's having feelings, maybe that anything they're doing in there is an extension of him, and he may even, he's got a mission, but in his dispassion, maybe he's resentful of, because I mean, there's a certain attitude of these fuckers are parasites. Sometimes.
Sure. Sure. And they don't. Yes, I'm lying to them, but that doesn't mean they shouldn't trust me.
Right.
Because I wonder, because of the nature of the movie, because Stanley Kubrick's such an iceberg, we don't find out one thing, and that is that if Hal is talking about, I feel this, I feel that, he has feelings, his sense of betrayal during the lip reading scene.
Oh my God!
He's having to do this lip reading. It's like for the first time, someone's keeping a secret from him.
As an audience, you kind of sense that too, because it's like you're getting that experience. So yeah.
Another weird thing with that movie is that we assume that the breathing that we're hearing during the assassination scene is Dave Bowman.
Right.
Sometimes I like to watch it and think that it's Hal.
And see what that does to your head. Yeah.
Yeah, getting increasingly nervous about this. This is Hal's own own sense there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
maybe
what an
as he begins to experience feelings, he also tries to replicate certain things about what it is to be human. Other,
yes.
and maybe sort of breathing is some kind of a thing that's going on
Yeah. Or
in his story.
it's just sauce for the goose,
Right. Sure.
artistically. Now it's funny that you think of this movie as a horror movie
In
because there's nothing
part,
funny about that.
correct.
It's a very worthy reading. I think of it as a comedy in that
Of
section
that too. I
that
mean,
that you have such cold, isolated people because that's especially in the '60s. That's what you had to have as astronauts. I mean, if you want to have a snooze fest, watch an interview with Neil Armstrong.
it's also an aesthetic. Yes, I know. That definitely was cold
Yeah,
and cool about anything. Otherwise, he would have been dead before he even got a chance to pilot.
sure, sure. And the
Well,
movie does such a good job of normalizing and making
sure.
mundane space travel.
And the thing
Taking
about
all of the
the 60s,
wonder out of
aesthetically
it.
about the 60s is too, it was an era of cool
Hmm.
overall. So, and James Bond is kind of holds it in unless he needs to do, if he's seducing a woman, but it's not like he's in love with her, it's being cool about it. It's that kind of thing. Cool about assassinating his targets and doing
Well,
various things.
that's why in the Bond films they always have to have the sacrificial lamb. There's always think of it like Jill Masterson, who's the sister of Tilly, who gets
Right,
goldified in the
right.
movie. When she's killed, it becomes personal for Bond
Yes.
because
So
otherwise he's just a
you have to know that he's
sociopath.
human in some way, even if he's being incredibly cool. He
And if you
still
look at almost all of those movies, there is some sacrificial lamb
has.
that now it's personal for
Mhm,
Bond. Even Octopussy, VJ Armitage,
mhm.
the
Yeah.
the tennis player, but he gets killed.
Right.
And yeah, and it goes on and on and on. It's one of those hidden parts of the ritual in there. But I think of it as sort of a comedy because you have these antiseptic people, the most emotion after the apes and before Hal really begins to get charmingly neurotic in
Right.
his lethal way, the most emotion that we see is Haywood Floyd biting his knuckle, looking at those endless instructions
Right.
for the zero gravity toilet.
Right. It's an
You know,
anxiety moment. Yeah.
as it's clear he really has to go, and he
Right.
really knows the disasters that could happen if he doesn't do this exactly right.
That's right.
And so that's the most emotional moment in the movie, up to Hal getting wacky. I
Right.
mean, Dave is even unbelievably professional about
Yes.
dealing with
Yeah.
Frank's
So
death.
you're saying is to make it, it's almost satirical because of the extremes that they go to be disconnected from emotion and dispassionately evaluating and
Yeah, that the machine, the AI, is the most emotion has the most emotional life
yes.
in the movie,
Right. Right.
and and that to me is very charming in its terrifying way. I mean, as far as monsters go, I just feel sorry for Hal. And now a lot of that's colored by the book and the movie of 2010,
Sure.
where
Sure.
which I like. I mean, they're not. They have really nothing to do
Yeah.
with what Kubrick was doing. And
No,
Kubrick even gave Peter Hyams his permission. He said, "Look, just make your movie.
you're right.
Don't worry about me." And so Hyams, who's a hack, nonetheless did.
Certainly compared to Kubrick, he was a
So,
hack.
well, yeah, but so is almost anybody. Uh, and I find that film and it's the relationship between Bob Balaban and Douglas Rain, in that two-hander where he's asking if he's going to dream, and he's basically contemplating dying again, but now he's contemplating the possibility of dying for a good reason. And
With
it's a
meaning,
for
yeah.
yeah, it's a formerly mentally ill person
Right.
who is basically righting the wrongs
Mm.
by willingly entering into this. And I really like that. I find that very touching. And
Yeah.
so that all has to do with the movie Talk to Me. You know. Uh Alan,
Well,
we're at 34 minutes.
there's
I
plenty of
think
There really isn't that kind of a resolution in Talk to Me. There is a resolution, however, and
There
the
is a resolution.
and it's ironic, and it's meant
Yeah.
to be, I think, that she ends up being summoned at the end of it, and she becomes a part of that ritual on the other end of it. And what has she got to say? And what is she going to say to these people? Is she going to warn them? Is she going to become part of the hellscape? And
I would say that's my only real problem with it, is that she seems still too sane, too composed to be a part of this. So wouldn't it be ironic if it's the process of her being pulled into this guy unwillingly, that actually
triggers
drives
it.
her to the
Yeah,
point of insanity that the
right.
rest of the ghosts are at? The rest of the ghosts would be fine,
Right.
except for this goddamn hand
Yeah, right.
that keeps basically waking them out of a sound sleep and saying, hey, you need to do stuff.
Going inside these stinky teenage minds. Come
God,
on.
yeah,
Getting
you know,
flooded with hormones again after being dead for a certain amount
yes,
of time. You know.
yes. All right. Well, anything else about Talk to Me?
Um, Hormones. That's it. Because there's
It's
definitely hormonal shit going on in this. I mean, the opening scene with a kid, he's looking for the kid, and the kid ends up, killing him and killing himself. It's like, wow,
wow.
that's angst for you right there. That's
Yeah.
angst of insanity. But uh, that
It's
that's a nice window to open into. For
it's a it's a very it's ironic to talk about this. It's a very cruel beginning for a horror
it
film.
is.
And it's funny because we think of horror as being intrinsically that, but often it's not. Often it plays by very strict rules,
Mm-hmm.
and it's going to show the audience, even a scary horror movie, it's going to show the audience a good time, but under very specific circumstances and under very specific rules, and sort of excessive self-harm, and you know from a character that we immediately establish something emotional with by seeing the way that others are concerned about them,
Right.
and that they start out speaking kind of cogently, and so we hope it's all a big misunderstanding.
Right. And he's going
They're
to
all going to go
get
get
in
ice cream.
the car and go home or whatever. Yeah.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
yeah.
And when that happens, I think it buys the movie its next half hour, which is pretty inert. Except that it's establishing and rooting us in all these
Right. And
relationships.
that isn't established. Yeah. That's sort of the most of the first act is all about that sort of thing, establishing what's going to come, what is happening, why it's happening, all that stuff.
I would say, from a storytelling point of view, that's the biggest stunt in the movie, because it's getting us just close to the surface of the water boring,
Mm-hmm.
but it then keeps finding little ways to veer off to hold
Right.
our attention,
Right.
without
And I think
getting.
the anticipation of that first scene establishes an anticipation of what the fuck's going to happen next.
That's right.
And then that lets you sit through all of that establishing information.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
because something else could happen pretty quickly. They
Yep.
establish the ritual, and they establish the unpredictability of some of these characters emotionally, and so on. This mother who's hostile towards some of the friends, and foreshadowing of that stuff that's going on. And then ironically, she becomes unhostile when she should remain hostile, because there's
Yeah.
danger there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And again, that brings me back to sort of the ghost of Hamlet's father, if it even is his father.
right.
And just, and I love the question of, is this if it's his father, is his father sane? And if it's not his father, what is
What
it?
is it? Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I've always wanted to do a production where, because he's described as having a very specific helmet,
Mm.
with the beaver up,
Right.
and
He's dressed for
and I would
know.
love to see a production where, at the end, when Fortinbras enters, he's got that
He's got
helmet
that
and he's
helmet
got
on.
the armor,
Yeah.
and this was all his scheme. Now it makes it all way too literal, but it's kind of funny. It's
Yes.
all his scheme to destabilize Elsinore from inside,
Right.
in the wake of this.
Well, there have been a lot of interpretations of Hamlet. I don't understand. I would not object to a number more of
Sure.
to do it. I mean, the big question with the character of Hamlet is he crazy? Is he not? Is he just neurotic? Is he just in fear of his life in combination with being in grief? But those things can drive you crazy temporarily too. So
Here's a question. How much do you think that question was on Shakespeare's mind? Or is that a question that we're really bringing into it post psychology?
Well, some of what is post psychology is definitely what we're bringing into it in the modern eye, in much the same way as our treatment of the Jewish question with the Merchant of Venice is being soft.
Oh, yeah, that's a
now because of its modern connotations, because of the way we view that now through modern lens.
I have a what's your stance on that?
My stance on that is to show as much ugliness and bigotry as possible, because that's a human element that is a precursor to tragedy. And anything, the fact that people are using his Jewishness as an excuse for certain behaviors, for their own behaviors and for his, that's bigotry. Why not just say this guy is a grasping asshole who wants to chop off a piece of a person's, but you can do. It's clear to me that, of course, it's of its time, and Jewish people were not particularly well thought of in general by European society. They were kicked around and made to move, and so on, and pogroms were happening back then too. So, but at the same time, seeing the ugliness of that has value.
Shakespeare called it a comedy. Shakespeare saw it as a comedy. That's the label that we traditionally give it. And I do think it can be a very funny play.
No, it's absurd and extremes sometimes.
Sure. Yeah. And I find Shylock to be a very funny character who has poignant moments. Right. Here's how I approach the Jewish question with Merchant of Venice, and it is rescued by Tubal and Jessica.
Yes.
Because they are quite Jewish, but they're normative figures,
right?
And so
they're not Shylock.
Yeah, and so Shylock's issues have nothing to do with his Jewishness.
Right.
He will use his Jewishness to political advantage
and to express his resentments in general. Yeah.
Yes, but I think under other circumstances he would, if it was about his shoe size,
right,
he would talk about that. That's not to say that there was not suffering,
right,
at all. But it is to say that I think that's how you can find the comical elements
right,
to that character, and it's the portrayal of the other Jews in the play, which are fine.
Right.
I think
they're not right. That resentment and that burdensome attitude that he has, where everybody's his enemy, basically, because
he's a comical miser. He is, he is Jack Benny by way of Vincent Price.
Right. And that's the reason. But as you say, it's a transference, because he's a miser, because he's a moneylender, because he does all this shit and screws people over, and usury, and everything else when he feels like it. If he doesn't like somebody, he really puts the screws to him. But he thinks, it's because I'm Jewish. No, man, it's because this is what you're doing.
Well, and the issue is that we are doing the play now, where we do have sensitivities and awarenesses, and that darn you awareness, you ruined the comedy. Awareness, I'll get you yet.
Yes.
So, all right. Well, again, it's all about talk to me. Alan, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir.
And I will see you again soon.
All right. Have a good evening.
Okay, you too. Figure out how to disregard.